On a cold morning in January 2007, the co-chief executive of Research in Motion stood transfixed before a television screen in Waterloo, Ontario. Mike Lazaridis was watching a product launch that felt less like a competitor entering the arena and more like a violation of network physics. On stage in San Francisco, Steve Jobs held up a sleek glass rectangle and promised 3 revolutionary devices in one. Inside RIM, the initial reaction was not panic, but profound disbelief. Engineers at the Canadian tech giant immediately tore apart the public demonstration. They calculated the bandwidth required to run desktop-class web pages and video over cellular networks, concluding the device was impossible. Lazaridis reportedly wondered how Apple persuaded AT&T to allow a phone that would collapse wireless towers. What RIM failed to understand was that AT&T had surrendered network control for exclusivity, altering the balance of power between telecom carriers and device manufacturers forever. To comprehend this blind spot, one must examine the empire Research in Motion had constructed. Founded in 1984, RIM spent 2 decades perfecting mobile data efficiency. Their breakthrough came with secure push email architecture delivered directly to a handheld device. By compressing data through proprietary servers, RIM gave corporate executives, politicians, and celebrities instantaneous communication without draining battery life or overwhelming networks. The BlackBerry was no longer just a phone, it was an addictive status symbol. That success bred a dangerous cultural dogma, the absolute supremacy of the physical keyboard. RIM built its identity on the tactile click of plastic keys, tailored for thumbs typing brief, urgent corporate memos. To executive leadership in Waterloo, typing on glass was an inefficient novelty enterprise clients would reject. They viewed the consumer market as a distraction, believing IT managers and security directors would forever dictate hardware purchasing. That miscalculation marked the beginning of a fatal divergence. When the iPhone launch occurred in early 2007, it redefined the smartphone from a business tool into a pocket-sized multimedia computer. Steve Jobs recognized that software, not hardware, would define mobile computing. While RIM designed phones around constrained data limits, Apple assumed network bandwidth would expand and processor speeds would soar. Consumers quickly proved willing to trade physical keyboards and multi-day battery life for immersive touchscreens, fluid web browsing, and rich visual interfaces. Inside RIM, internal memos reflected a fractured leadership team struggling to process the shift. Co-CEOs Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie operated in split worlds, with Lazaridis focusing on hardware architecture while Balsillie managed global sales. Rather than rebuilding their aging operating system from scratch, leadership attempted incremental patches. They dismissed initial iPhone sales as early adopter hype, convinced business professionals would return to secure, key-based devices once the glossy charm wore off. That complacency ignored a crucial economic shift occurring within corporate boardrooms. Employees were demanding the right to use personal smartphones for work, giving birth to the bring-your-own-device movement. Suddenly, corporate IT departments were no longer the sole gatekeepers of hardware purchasing. As corporate employees carried personal iPhones into executive suites, the defense network RIM had built around corporate procurement collapsed from within, dismantling their market monopoly quarter by quarter. Desperate to retain carrier relationships and counter the touchscreen threat, RIM rushed a reactionary response to market in late 2008. The BlackBerry Storm was designed to offer the best of both worlds, featuring a physical, clickable screen mechanism known as Sure Press. The execution was a disaster. The screen was clunky and plagued by software bugs that froze devices during calls. The mechanical glass mechanism broke down at alarming rates across global wireless networks. The financial and reputational damage of the storm was catastrophic. Verizon, RIM's primary carrier partner in North America, saw near-total return rates on initial shipments, resulting in hundreds of millions of dollars in replaced inventory. Engineers had been forced to push unfinished software past quality control to meet marketing deadlines. The debacle shattered carrier confidence in RIM's engineering invincibility, opening the door for wireless providers to heavily promote new Android devices entering the market. While RIM faltered with flawed hardware, Google's open-source Android platform moved rapidly into the vacuum. Android provided every hardware manufacturer with a modern touchscreen operating system capable of running complex applications. Within 2 years of the iPhone launch, RIM was fighting a war on two fronts. Apple owned the high-end consumer market, while Android swallowed the mid-tier and budget segments globally. BlackBerry's market share began a relentless, irreversible downward slide. The structural failure at RIM extended deep into its dual CEO governance model. Divided responsibilities created strategic gridlock at the exact moment decisive action was required. While Balsillie pursued an aggressive bid to purchase an NHL franchise and broaden global carrier deals, Lazaridis remained obsessed with keyboard design and battery optimization. The leadership structure prevented the company from making the single pivot that mattered, completely abandoning their legacy software code to build a modern application platform. Software developers were among the first to abandon the platform. Building apps for BlackBerry required navigating legacy developer tools that were notoriously difficult and limited in capability. Meanwhile, Apple's App Store and Google Play transformed smartphones into software platforms where independent developers could build booming businesses. BlackBerry users found themselves locked out of popular applications, social games, and mobile banking services. A device without an app ecosystem was rapidly becoming obsolete to everyday consumers. By 2010, the forensic evidence of decline was visible across every major financial metric. Though total device shipments briefly hit historic highs due to international expansion in emerging markets, RIM's profitability per unit was eroding fast. High-margin North American subscribers were defecting en masse to touch devices. Emerging markets provided a temporary illusion of growth, disguising the reality that the foundational technology underlying the BlackBerry empire had reached a dead end. A cascading series of operational crises deepened the panic. In October 2011, a critical core switch failed in RIM's private network center in Slough, England. The outage spiraled globally, leaving tens of millions of users across Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and the Americas without email or messaging services for 3 days. For a company whose sole value proposition was ironclad enterprise reliability, the service failure permanently shattered brand trust among enterprise executives and government officials. The internal response was a belated, frantic attempt at total transformation. RIM acquired QNX Software Systems, an ultra-reliable industrial operating system, to serve as the foundation for a modern mobile platform. However, integrating an industrial microkernel into a polished mobile interface proved far more complex than management anticipated. Project deadlines stretched from months into years, forcing the company to launch underpowered transitional tablets like the BlackBerry Playbook, which launched without native email support. The delay in delivering a true next-generation smartphone operating system proved fatal. By the time BlackBerry 10 was officially revealed to the public in early 2013, the mobile operating system war was effectively over. iOS and Android had captured over 90% of global market share, locking in network effects that were virtually impossible to disrupt. Developers had zero incentive to port their applications to a third platform with a shrinking subscriber base. The eventual release of the BlackBerry 10 flagship devices, the touch-based Z10 and the traditional physical keyboard Q10, highlighted the fatal strategic compromise still dividing the company. Thorsten Heinz, who had replaced Lazaridis and Balsillie as CEO, pitched the platform as a sleek, gesture-driven workhorse. But the market had moved on 6 years prior. Consumers no longer wanted a business communicator that could perform basic multimedia tasks. They wanted a digital lifestyle hub. Initial sales figures for the Z10 were disastrous. Unsold inventory piled up in carrier warehouses worldwide as consumers ignored the new devices in favor of the iPhone 5 and Samsung Galaxy lines. In late 2013, BlackBerry was forced to record an agonizing $995 million inventory write-down for unsold Z10 devices. The financial blow stripped away remaining cash reserves, forcing the company into massive corporate downsizing, firing thousands of veteran engineers and executives. The forensic analysis of this corporate disaster reveals a fatal strategic error: the conviction that past core competencies will protect a business from architectural innovation. RIM believed its keyboard technology, network compression, and enterprise relationships were insurmountable moats. In reality, those moats became anchor chains holding the company under as the tide of user expectation shifted from hardware metrics to software capabilities and platform ecosystems. As hardware sales evaporated, BlackBerry surrendered its manufacturing infrastructure entirely. The company pivoted toward enterprise security software, licensing its brand name to third-party manufacturers who produced niche devices. The iconic physical keyboard, once the universal status symbol of global commerce, became an artifact in technology museums. Waterloo's hardware division was quietly dismantled, marking the end of one of the most drastic value destruction events in corporate history. The fall of BlackBerry remains a textbook lesson in market disruption dynamics. Dominant market leaders rarely fail because they stop innovating. They fail because they continue innovating along a trajectory that the market no longer values. Research in Motion perfected the enterprise communication tool just as the market demanded a consumer entertainment platform. They optimized every mechanical detail of the physical keyboard while the rest of the world embraced the flexible screen. When leadership finally accepted that software was the true battlefield, the ecosystem lock-in built by rival platforms was insurmountable. Neither engineering genius nor billions of dollars in cash reserves could overcome 6 years of lost momentum. The structural delay gave competitors time to establish global app ecosystems, refine user interfaces, and build supply chain advantages that permanently closed the window of opportunity for any new mobile platform entrant. Today, BlackBerry operates quietly as a cybersecurity firm, its consumer smartphone division completely erased from global market share tables. The physical keyboard that once defined executive mobility has vanished from modern design templates. The fall was not caused by a single bad product launch or temporary economic downturn, but by a fatal refusal to abandon a winning formula when the fundamental rules of the industry had changed forever. The ledger of business history is uncompromising when recording the demise of industry titans. The collapse of Research in Motion serves as a warning to every market incumbent operating at the peak of its power. When disruptive change arrives, legacy dominance provides no shelter, hardware authority guarantees no survival, and the refusal to reimagine your own product remains the most dangerous strategic error of all.